Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
Avery, we just got back from the movie theater where we went and saw Civil War. How did you think Anthony Mackie was as the Falcon?
I was gonna make a Captain America Civil War joke and you won.
Wait, I think I f***ed up the Captain America. I was thinking Winter Soldier.
Oh, was he in that? Yeah, he was in
Yeah.
that. He kicked Spider-Man.
He kicked Spider-Man.
Right.
I was thinking of Winter Soldier when I made the joke.
You know, in my head, that's like my favorite MCU movie, but I don't remember much of it.
Anyway, welcome to our review of Alex Garland's Civil War, which is not in the MCU.
No. Do you want to talk about Alex Garland first or this movie first?
I think
First
we ought to
thoughts?
talk about Mr. Garland first because we have history with this man.
He's an interesting, enigmatic guy. He's made 2 of probably my 5 favorite movies ever, An Ex Machina and Annihilation, which are both just absolutely brilliant, stunning, perfect pieces of science fiction. And he's made some other stuff that's like weird. I didn't watch his last one, which was Men.
So I watched Men.
You watched Men. What are your thoughts on Men?
Men was good.
People didn't like it.
I didn't love it, but it was entertaining. It's better than most movies.
Yeah.
But it's not, from Alex Garland perspective, it was on the low end.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, Annihilation and Ex Machina are his big boys.
Yeah.
He made the show Devs, which we both enjoyed.
It was good. It was mixed.
Weird.
Yeah.
It was a weird show.
It was not a perfect.
Not a
project.
perfect show, but it was solid. And then
some-
if you go further back, the deep history, he wrote 28 Days Later,
Yes.
which was one of my formative horror movies as a young lad. I watched that movie dozens of times as a kid, and it potentially was one of the first horror movies I ever saw, and we had it on DVD, which is why I
Right.
watched it so many times. So that was a huge part of my kind of childhood horror experience, and then you and I, and our kind of group of friends, loved the movie Dread, which he wrote.
Oh yeah.
And the kind of industry secret is that he not only wrote it, he apparently basically directed it. He's not the director. I forget the name of the director, but people on set said Alex Garland basically took over. And if you look at the director's filmography, it's kind of like weird how he did Dread.
Yeah.
It's because Alex Garland was apparently pretty much behind the camera. And Dread is one of the movies we watched like first together. It was like in our friendship, was one of the first movies we watched at like a movie night.
One of the earliest proto-green takes. Because we talked about it
We did.
and we liked it.
So yeah, Alex Garland, he's probably one of the more prolific sci-fi directors. Like, we talk about a lot of directors, and I feel like I end up saying this is one of the best directors working today. Alex Garland is one of the best directors working today, specifically within sci-fi. I think he's top of the game. Sci-fi
Yeah.
and horror, he's carved out a real niche. And I think it was a no-brainer we were going to go see this movie just based on his resume and tenure. Like, I didn't look at anything about this movie. I don't know if you did. I knew nothing going in.
I'm aware of some of what I'll come out and say was horrific mismarketing of it. That completely is contributing to why a lot of people seem to be confused about this movie.
Okay, because I don't even know the critical reception. I didn't even look at Rotten Tomatoes on this, so I'm coming in totally blind.
Okay, so I can talk a little bit about that just because I think I'm a little more online maybe than you. And there's a lot of publicity material that's like maps of the US with all the different factions, territories marked out.
Got it.
And like, which side are you on
Okay.
type stuff.
Good marketing.
Horrible.
Well, good
Horrible
marketing. Good marketing to sell tickets.
Yeah.
Bad marketing for what the movie
Not
is.
even a little bit what this movie's about, which is why I'm sure a lot of people have come into the theater and left completely flabbergasted.
Sure.
And I've heard a lot. That's kind of the thing I'm seeing is that most of what I've seen is to the effect of, I don't really get it. It seems unfocused or confused to this movie, but like not a lot of like outright hatred, just more like
Confusion.
yeah.
Interesting. That, like, as someone who knew nothing going in about the marketing, about the reception, that does surprise me. I thought it was a pretty straightforward movie in terms of like, I don't know. I don't totally see where the confusion would stem from, but I guess we'll get into that with our
Yeah.
discussion. I think we should do first thoughts.
First thoughts. You go first. Tell me your thoughts that are first.
I really like this.
Oh wow.
I would edge on saying I loved it.
Wow.
This movie got under my skin. I was edge of my seat in the movie theater. I was completely immersed in this movie from beginning to end. And the end of the movie, my heart was like racing. Like,
Yeah.
I have not been that stimulated by a movie in a long time, even in theaters. Like even Dune Part 2, which we talked about recently, I loved seeing in theaters. This as a movie, as a theater experience, I say this was like almost on par with that, with some of the high highs of being like really floored by the cinematic experience and like feeling a lot of emotions in the theater. So it really clicked with me. I guess if the feedback is mixed online, I guess I'm in the minority with how much I loved this.
Yeah.
But I thought it was great, and we just walked out of the theater an hour ago, but my gut reaction is this is amongst his best work from his filmography. Like I wouldn't put this. I'm not saying it is his best movie. It
might be third.
But it's up in the top stuff. It's nowhere near. It's way better than Men, for example, which I was mixed on. This is way above that. And I think I need to think about it a bit more to see where it fits in with the Ex Machinas and Annihilations and those. But
yeah,
I think it's batting with those guys for me. So that's my takes. I really enjoyed it. What did you think?
I think on the whole, I really enjoyed it. I spent most of this movie confused and not quite getting what it was. And I really was forcing myself to be patient and let the movie get there. Because it just kept feeling to me, and I'm sure some of this is seeing all the blatant mismarketing and being kind of wrong about my vague expectations going in. I'm gonna say, yeah, I spent the first 90% of this movie not sure what he's trying to say, not sure what the point was, not sure, like the decisions were not all coming together for me.
Okay.
And it was about 5 minutes before the end when I went like, I get it.
Yeah.
I think I said that out loud in the theater.
When the movie ended, you said, I get it.
Yeah, and it snapped into what it was. And once I kind of looked back through the movie kind of with and I don't want to totally spoil it yet.
We'll go to spoilers later. It's still spoiler free.
But once I knew what the movie was and thought about the whole thing in those terms, it made a lot more sense, and I really liked it and thought it was effective. But I do kind of think that a lot of things outside the movie are messy, and this is being pulled in some directions.
Interesting. And I wonder if this is just because I was impervious to the marketing, like I didn't see any of it. Mm-hmm. But I loved this movie a lot more than you did, it seems. Like I think I liked it more than you did.
Yeah.
When you said, I get it at the end, I still don't know what you mean. Okay. Because there was no aha moment for me. I kind of felt like I was just riding with the movie the whole time. I never didn't understand what he was trying to say, and the ending was just kind of reinforcing what the rest of the movie was already doing. So when we get into spoilers in a minute here, I'm very curious what you get, because I'm sure there's interpretations that you found that I haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah.
But I find that almost surprising, because it didn't feel like the kind of movie that you could get to me. So I kind of want to know what that is. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
The so-called Western forces of Texas and California have suffered a very great defeat.
Those are our first thoughts. I think we'd both recommend checking this out.
It's worth a watch.
It's well worth a watch. And we will now get into spoilers. This is Green Takes.
We're not going to tell you every single scene that happens, but if you want to go have it unspoiled, probably go watch it right now.
Yeah. So I guess why don't we start with what did you mean when you say I get it? Let's start with that.
What I got from this movie was that this was a more standard movie than I thought for most of it. It's a movie about war journalists in a war. The fact that it's America is largely incidental to that. I went in expecting a very American political, not necessarily explicitly anti-Trump, but something that was a lot more about American culture and American people that it ultimately ended up being. Setting this movie in Sudan or Iraq or Yemen or something like that
just
would
a
not
country
have
that's
changed it.
completely separate from American culture, you're saying.
Yeah, and it was very late in the movie that I just kind of realized that they decided to make something. I mean, I think it was been a while since I've seen it, but I think Three Kings was a very similar movie, just set in Iraq or the Middle East somewhere. That it was essentially just that movie and just happened to be taking place in the American Civil War. And he had very little interest in kind of talking about the politics and the factions and what had actually happened to get America to this state. It was kind of there, but it focused on it a lot less than I was expecting, and I think I kept looking for more of that, and that was part of why I was a little confused.
So in light of that, what did you get at the end that resolved that confusion?
Well, that was it. It was that there were certain parts of this movie that were really confusing to me, and some of that was like the color palette.
It's very colorful.
It's so bright and it looks like Zombieland.
Yeah.
And I didn't get why. And the music was really weird.
Really rock music, pop music in very heavy scenes.
Yeah, and then some of the scenes, some of just the random resistance fighters who were wearing garish Hawaiian shirts. That seems like a small thing, but it was obviously deliberate, and I just didn't get it. It was what? I understand they're not necessarily soldiers, but anyone would know, don't wear Hawaiian stuff. Like, it was a weird decision. And there was just like dozens and dozens of these little things that just kept happening. I'm like, what are you trying to say about America and politics? And then it was sort of at the end of the movie, within the last 5 minutes, that I realized that Alex Garland was not really saying that much about America. He wasn't. This was supposed to be like a movie taking place in a third world country, just transposed onto America, just through a different lens. That's what I took away from it.
And like forcing Americans to see those conflicts,
Yeah.
how it would feel if it was on your own soil.
But not how it would legitimately play out if it were in America. Not how it would actually feel if like America fell into civil war and fell apart. Because I don't think it was a good portrayal of that. It didn't feel like a gritty, realistic take of, you know, the American political divide escalating into war. It did not give me that at all. And I think I kept trying to connect that. And I just don't think it was there. It's just like, we're doing a war journalism movie in a war. The war happens to be in America, and we're not going to talk about American culture really beyond that. That was kind of how I got.
Yeah, okay. I think I wholeheartedly disagree.
Okay.
Every time I survived a war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home. Don't do this.
My takeaway from this movie was that this movie is deeply American and specific to America, in my viewing of it. I will agree that it did not explore what are the sides, what led to this. The movie starts and the Civil War is towards its end.
It
right?
seems very deliberate that they were like, it's Texas and California, which are the two states the least likely to team up.
Yeah.
That seemed deliberate to just be like, no, this is not... Neither of them are the conservatives or the Democrats or the
Yeah, and the
libertarians.
president is not clearly Trump.
No.
Right? Like, it's not trying to... Or Biden. It's not trying to be, like, one specific president. But I still feel like we're Canadian, but we're very plugged into what's happening in the U.S. And the U.S. is clearly in a place where it is very divided.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that. So I almost feel like the movie glossing over that is in light of the fact that it is such a well-known fact in our everyday life that they let that world building speak for itself. So rather than sit down and be like, these states are separating because they support Trump and these states fell in with Biden and his administration, because I feel like if they got into that, as much as it may have cleared it up, I think we also could have rolled our eyes at that setup and be I get it. Like, I think they glossed over it, explained as little as possible because they just assumed people are going to understand that there's a clear divide in the states. We don't need to clarify that and just focus on tell this story about these journalists. I will agree the story about the journalists kind of exists outside the American conflict, but I think the conflict being set in the US is very specifically about the divide that exists in the US, and not commenting on it or explaining the objectives of both sides didn't make it not US specific. It was just more trying to let the world building be organic, was my interpretation of it.
Interesting, because yeah, I think we do disagree, and I think a lot of the conflict, a lot of the people they ran into, and this is what kind of clicked, but there was, like, they were having all these little scenes where they were just running into people, and the more I just transpose that onto something like, I don't know, like Hotel Rwanda, right? Just one of these movies where it's like a lawless wasteland and that's what you expect. Now they all make sense. You just have two sniper guys in a shootout that are deliberately like, I'm not working for anybody, there's just a guy shooting at me and I'm shooting back. That just felt so not correct for an American Civil War. But if I just think of it as like, they are just depicting a war-torn country.
But why is that not American? Why would that work in a third world country?
The fact that
he
this guy very deliberately said, like, I have no affiliation, I don't care.
Yeah, but to me, that was like showing how, despite the fact that there is this clear culture and political divide in the States, if a conflict broke out, most people don't actually know enough about politics and all these things to attach themselves to one side or understand the ideologies. A lot of people, kind of like the Purge, are just going to get caught up in the chaos and start killing each other. Like, I think that was a big point of the movie, is that, like, there's this conflict between the Western Front and the US and all this stuff, but most people just take this as an opportunity to do whatever they want and loot stuff and kill people and treat it like a Purge scenario, which feels very American. That feels to me like what would actually happen in a scenario like this. Everyone wouldn't cleanly fall into one of two camps. A lot of people would just be like, there's no police anymore, and all my neighbors are gone, so I'm just gonna do whatever I want. And some people are gonna end up in shootouts, some people are gonna end up in other weird scenarios.
I'll ask it this way. How long would you estimate that America had been in conflict before the events of the movie?
Couple months?
That doesn't make any sense, though. It wouldn't, like, within a couple months, there's, like, roving gangs of, like, lynchings and, like,
I'm not
there's
saying-
ghost towns. That's what I'm saying, though, is it felt like it had been like this for decades. And that's why I'm saying it feels like one of these complete, like, abandoned state third world countries where it's just, like not quite to the level of, like, Fallout, but almost.
Yeah.
And that's why it felt weird with this sort of sudden, abrupt American conflict.
I mean, I think the conflict was heightened for cinematic purposes. The color palette's popping, the Western Front soldiers are wearing Hawaiian shirts. These are clear creative decisions to make it like almost pop off the screen. And I agree, that is not a realistic portrayal of conflict. And
Yeah.
those two sniper guys, maybe that's like a heightened scenario. But despite all of the scenarios being heightened and maybe not being historically accurate to how a war would play out in like a simulator, it still felt uniquely American to me. Despite
What
that.
did?
I think just that it tapped into the divide that exists in the US and basically was like, if we took this divide that's in the States, like it does feel like there's two major camps and that is getting worse and worse with time. What if that happened and we just crank the knob to 11 to like its craziest final state?
But there was never an ideological difference in the movie. There was never two people arguing over something.
But I think that's American. I don't think most people on either sides of the fence in the US could even explain to the other one.
But there was never even like an attempt.
Right, but I'm saying that's intentional.
I agree, it was
Like
intentional.
I think that is, again...
But like, what characterizes the divide right now in the US to me is so much like dumb arguments. Right? It's the internet. It's like, no, screw you, and like it's about this and that, and like yelling at each other. And this movie didn't do 1 second of that.
No, but I think that energy is echoed in people having sniper fights and not even knowing why.
Yeah.
Like that just feels like the apathetic America that would exist. So I mean, obviously we have two different very reads
Yeah,
on it.
we got something completely different out of the movie.
It felt, and what I was gonna say is that the color palette being so poppy and contrasty, and the use of like very modern rock music in scenes that was almost ill-fitting, I was getting like what I imagine people not from the States think when they see like TikToks.
Right.
It's just like this overwhelming sensory like experience of like, there's this horrible stuff happening, but you guys aren't even talking about it, and there's these people on TikTok doing this, and it's just like all this color and noise and almost comic book levels pushing it is almost like, to me, taking the conflict that exists in the US and escalating it up to its ridiculous conclusion, including color and music and like,
Yeah.
and in that, it felt like a tapestry of the US. And I'm not saying it is a Risk Games like simulation of what an actual
Right.
war would be. I don't care about that, and I'm not saying it was. But I think that what it tapped into felt to me like it instilled the feelings in me that I have when I see conflicts in the US playing out. It made me feel those same emotions through these little vignettes that these characters were having without directly saying what the conflict was about or who believes in what.
Okay, that's an interesting way to take it. And again, I took it differently. For me, what I got from all like the heightened stuff and like the garish colors and like and there were things that were very on the nose, like America, like not like what do people outside think of the US, right? Department stores and Hawaiian shirts and cookouts. And that kind of led me to my conclusion, because it felt like they were shooting a Vietnam War movie, but just in America. And its interpretation of America was similar to like Apocalypse Now's depiction of Vietnam, where it's like, it doesn't deeply understand the politics and the factions. It's just like, we're just gonna shoot some pretty panoramic shots of the jungle, and we've got like some very we've got a lot of kind of superficial visuals, and then horrific violence, right? And it just feels very like flyover. Like I'm not gonna get hung up in what's actually going on. It's just like, just the visuals and the kind of artistry of like, what does this look and feel and sound like?
Yeah, but I do have to say, I think the States has reached a point where the reality is almost hard to believe at points.
Yeah.
And I think if Nick Offerman had got up there and done a Trump impression,
Yeah.
it would have been more clear, that's the Trump administration. But I think the States is at a point where it is so crazy in real life that a movie depicting the craziness, taking it a little more mellow, a little more toned down, and not being as clear and crystal clear about those conflicts and those divides, is almost to me like a reflection of the fact that it's so obvious in real life, he didn't feel the need to put all that in the movie.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm no way arguing that I wanted it to be like a more realistic portrayal of a U.S. Civil War breaking out. That's what I expected. I do not think that would have been better.
And this didn't hinder your enjoyment of it. It was just not what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's like I was expecting that, and I was confused by a lot of the decisions until I kind of looked at it from this different angle.
Okay. What kind of American are you? You don't know?
I have another kind of interpretation that's similar to this. Because I was thinking a lot about 28 Days Later watching this, which Alex Garland wrote. And 28 Days Later, structurally, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I'm pretty sure it's basically the same movie.
Yeah.
28 Days Later, the conflict in 28 Days Later is a zombie apocalypse, but it's already happened. And we wake up with our character 28 days after the apocalypse, and we don't see the outbreak. So it's kind of like with the Civil War. We're coming in late in the game. We've kind of missed the main conflict. And then in 28 Days Later, this ragtag group of like Cillian Murphy and 2 other people, they go across the country and they meet weird people and all these little vignettes. And it doesn't really matter that it's a zombie apocalypse. It could be any event, right? It's just about these people traveling and seeing weird stuff. And it's kind of an analysis of the UK subtly, and there's all this stuff going on. But I was thinking it's very similar. Like this movie I thought would be about the war at a big scale, but you're just following 4 journalists and you're seeing their perspective, and they're going across the country and they meet people and they stop for gas and have a weird interaction. And it's like, if it wasn't a civil war, like this movie could have been about a zombie apocalypse and had the same script, or a nuclear apocalypse, or vampires on the loose. Like it could have been anything, right? And the structure still would have worked. And I was just I realized halfway through, this is a post-apocalypse movie. Just instead of doing a post-apocalypse, you're doing an American Civil War, but the end result is the same in terms of what you can do with the script and how the characters interact with the world.
Yeah.
And I found that really interesting. It almost feels like Alex Garland going back to his roots, which was a very UK-centric story following that format. And he's like, why don't I drop that into the US? And why don't I update zombies to something that would be a little more contemporary, that I feel is more relevant for right now? And I just think that was a very interesting angle, like in a weird correlation with his first kind of big script.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do think there's a lot of parallels. I mean, the thing, like the biggest difference being that there was a lot less, 28 Days Later was a well-made movie, but it was not nearly this like artistic. No. Right? There was a lot more gritty. Everything was grounded. Everything made sense for the setting. Like once they established this is England, there's been zombies for a bit, everything made perfect sense within that.
Yeah.
And that was kind of where this movie differentiated itself.
Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th.
Oh my God.
Get in the car! Get in the car!
All the technical aspects, I think, speak for themselves. It's a beautiful movie. Every performance is very good.
I don't agree.
Who did you not like?
I didn't like Joe, and I didn't like the girl. The younger girl. Nope. I thought she was in the wrong movie. Until the end. I liked her towards the end, but this was part of it. Is she felt like she was out of like the tone. I couldn't grasp the tone, and she just didn't fit the tone for me.
Huh.
She's like so idealistic and cheery. It's like, there's a war. Like I don't.
Yeah, well, they kind of shut that down in the first interaction when they see the guys hanging. Like I feel like she like bounces back to it though, and it's just like it felt like it was in a different movie. I don't think she did. I thought she was great, and I thought Joe, played by the guy who plays Pablo Escobar in Narcos,
that guy.
I thought he was fantastic. I thought he was giving Kirsten Dunst a run for the best performance in the movie. So I'm way out on this. I thought he was a very good portrayal of like someone who's very good at their job but cares about someone else a bit. Like he's clearly willing to be a mentor for the younger girl and like kind of flirting with her, kind of like making sure she's safe. but they never pushed it to a weird level. Like he was still like always very professional, and the journalism came first, and he felt like a very real person. Him and Kirsten Dunst both, I thought, like, were a very compelling leading duo. And I've said I love watching movies where people are good at their jobs.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is a movie about journalists that feels like it did its research about what being a photojournalist of war would actually be like. And that was an interesting angle. I didn't know this movie is about photojournalism. I thought this was about like a family going across the US or something. I had no idea. So when it was about journalism, that's so specific. But I thought that was like an interesting angle because I think the movie would have worked with a more generic family. Like a family has to get from New York to Washington because their house has been destroyed during the Civil War. But it was so much more interesting to me to have it be the press, because it gave them like a good excuse to be chasing the conflict while still like making sense within the script. And it also, I don't know, I found that a lot more interesting than a more generic setup.
I definitely agree that it was interesting, and it was specific enough to the point where I'm now pretty sure either Alex Garland or like one of his parents was a war journalist. Like it was too specific.
Well,
he at least like knows one.
I think it was, and maybe I'm reading into this too much, but I think it was him drawing parallels to himself as a filmmaker.
I had that thought, and I went with it for a little bit, but...
Because, I mean, yeah, a big thing is about, like, what's your responsibility as a journalist, right? If you see these horrific acts, do you just take photos, or do you step in and be like, hey, don't kill that guy, right? That's a big conflict explored in the movie. And Alex Garland, he doesn't photograph real wars, from what I'm aware of, but he makes pretty horrific movies. He makes movies that are usually sci-fi or horror and deal with really heavy stuff, really heavy themes and subject matter. And maybe there's some part of him that this movie is a bit of a reflection on, like, his responsibility as a filmmaker in putting out horrific acts of violence in his movies. Is there a responsibility to make sure that that violence is justifiable and, like, worth something? When Sammy dies in the movie, it almost felt to me like it could be a reflection of him, of like, have I been too gratuitous in the past? Like, have I... just putting out gratuitous violence in movies to make money with a movie, is that worth it? If I'm exposing people to these visuals, maybe that's not right at all. But it was something I was thinking about, because this is late enough in his career that it feels like he can kind of get up into his own head and start projecting in that way.
Like I said, I thought about that. That occurred to me at some point. It's probably at the same point. There's probably something that made that kind of obvious that we both kind of picked up on, but it just didn't, I couldn't square it in my head to where that fit in with the rest of the movie. And like I said, the way that I think that he came into this movie was that he, for whatever reason, was very interested in making a movie about war journalists. He wanted to make like a harrowing, but also kind of heartwarming and cheery, and kind of the clash of tones inherent to being a journalist in wartime. And then it seemed like he had a lot of the script out and was like, what if we just made it in the US? It's not in Iraq. It's not in Syria. It's not in Palestine. It's in the US.
Interesting.
And then that's where he started from. And then he built out from there.
Because I obviously... My thought is he said, I want to make a movie about a civil war in the United States. And then eventually was like, who are the leads going to be? Oh, it'd be interesting if they were journalists.
Okay, so Alex, you're going to have to let us know who's right.
One of us is right. Or it's something else.
I'm pretty sure I'm right. I don't think he did that because the movie just didn't care about America.
I disagree.
Yeah,
I think it cared a lot about America.
Yeah.
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty.
This script was a first draft. There were 15 lines in this movie that were just like, no, you go back and you write a better version of that line. See all those bullets lighting up the night sky. Like, what? The hell? No one talks like that. There was a lot of lines like that where I was just like, that was not how people talk, and that's not how that character would talk.
Huh. I just didn't have any of these jump out to me.
Yeah, I had a lot of them. And that felt weird. That felt weird. There was a lot of the dialogue where I'm like, that was just the wrong version of that sentence. And like, do a couple takes and say that in a way the character would say it. And that bothered me. And
I didn't have any of that.
If I were to go back over the edit, I didn't write them all down. This is a green takes. If this was a deep dive, I would have written a lot more of them down. But I had enough of those that it bothered me, and that's not something I'm usually bothered by.
No, and it's, I mean, I didn't feel that way at all. I don't think that's probably an issue you've had with other Alex Garland scripts.
God, no.
So I would,
No, I mean, not in the slightest.
No. To me, I mean, I was going to say I thought the script was very, like, grounded and well written. So obviously we're kind of
I think like large strokes and like scene to scene and like the structure of it, yeah. But that's what I mean by first draft, is it was the little moments of dialogue between characters where I'm just like, no, that was not what they would have said to each other. That was when you're writing out like, man talks to girl in backseat of truck, like you just do like, he says something like this. And they just recorded that on the first try and didn't think about it. And I had I was clocking it. Like after I had noticed it the second or third time, there was a bunch more of these where I'm just like, ugh.
Interesting. I don't agree, but it's gonna hit you the way it hits you.
That was my biggest bad. And I don't think it absolutely didn't ruin the movie for me, but especially because I spent so much of it trying to like bring it in focus and understand what he was trying to say and where like that was just weird. And like the fact there are all these like heightened, almost anachronistic things, like having odd dialogue choices on top of it, and I think odd casting choices on top of it was just like, just too much.
Yeah, we're just two different worlds in this, because I found this movie very easy to comprehend, and I found all the dialogue
Well, you were
good.
wrong though, so it's clearly you didn't comprehend
We're having our own civil war here at the Green Corner.
You're gonna hang back.
The action was like Wind River good.
Yeah.
Like
Edge of your seat.
insanely gritty and tense and real, and yeah, you just felt it.
This is like pulse pounding action. Like
Yeah.
This movie did escalating tension better than stuff I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
The scene with Jesse Plemons.
Oh yeah.
The shootout that they're photographing earlier in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many sequences where I was sure that anyone could be shot.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be like the main characters are safe. Like I was on the edge of my seat, like, and they pulled it off like 3 or 4 times. Right up until the White House raid, I was still like incredibly nervous and engaged by the action. And I think it kept that tension on like a razor's edge for so long.
Yeah, and like the last 20 minutes feels like the way that a Call of Duty campaign felt like when I was 9, which doesn't sound like high praise, but I assure you it's very high praise.
I almost opened this instead of the Civil War joke. I was gonna say Civil War or the coolest Call of Duty campaign of all time.
Yes, that's very much what this was like in the best possible way.
Yes.
Again, but yeah, no, that's probably my highest high point. Like I think that there were cool ideas and there were good performances, but like my number one, like why should you go watch this movie? Because this is up there with like Hurt Locker and
Yeah,
Black Hawk Down,
really
like,
good war movies.
the best war movies
Yeah.
in the scenes where that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
God bless America.
Well, I think we should get into scoring.
I have no idea what I'm going to score this.
Certainly, we're going to be different. I liked it more, so I think that means you have to go. Because you're the tough guy here in the Green Corner. Old cranky Avery.
That's the thing, is I did like this movie. I did. And it's not a criticism to say that that it took me a bit to figure out and
No,
that I
it's
don't.
not.
No, I enjoyed that and I liked it. I think that it's just so hard to score this stuff.
Well, like always here on the Green Corner, we're going to do our critical review, which is our pure objective review, and then we'll do our personal. And remember, that can
Okay.
give you the freedom to maybe express different leanings. So what's your critical review?
Critical review.
And this is Green Takes, which means we just got out of the theater. It means we will be held to this, and in 10 years, we can't change our minds. So just don't forget that. This is set in stone, and it's actually going to be on your tombstone, too.
Right. Critically, I'm going to give this a B+. And I think that there were absolute A+ parts of this movie, and I really respect the ambition and the way that it tied a lot of things together. I think there was an A+ movie in here, and I'm not knocking it down into the B's because of my interpretation of it. I'm
Right.
knocking it down to the B's because of my problems with the script and with... I just think there was a tighter, more focused movie in here, and that some of his ideas and like artistry detracted from what the movie was trying to do. It was just a little too much in there,
Okay.
which I'm sure Alex Garland would look at and say it was all necessary and that it all served the point. But I think the average person is going to have their experience detracted from by just trying to get a little too much of the...
Like they're distracted by trying to figure it out,
Yeah,
essentially?
yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. But B+.
Okay. And what's your personal?
Personally, it's going to go up one to an A-. I really liked watching this.
All right.
And I would rewatch it just in order, because I want to look at it through that lens, through understanding it and having seen the whole thing and settled on my interpretation. And I think it's a really good movie. I don't think it is going to have legs. I think everyone's going to forget about this pretty fast.
And I just want to say that does shock me that this movie isn't being talked about more. Because even if it was outrage, I would expect a reaction.
Yeah.
And I feel like no one is talking about this.
I think that part of that is because it doesn't take a stance, and so many people who went in ready to be really mad, like I'm sure some people are, but a lot of them went in ready to like, yeah, let's get that other side, and they walked out like, huh?
Yeah, like, screw Trump or screw Biden, or
Yeah.
like whatever side you think you want to go in and see your team up on the screen. They didn't do that.
Then he walked out and was like, no, that was just a bunch of horrifying stuff.
Yeah.
Ugh, forget that. But yeah, I really liked watching it, and A-.
A-. All right, well, for my critical, I'm going to give it an A. I think this was just a damn fine movie. I would put it up amongst his best. I think it's a really strong script, personally. I think I didn't have the dialogue issues you did. I think the dialogue itself is good. I think the actual like narrative of them going on this journey was an engaging storyline. It felt like I was watching like The Last of Us or 28 Days Later, and I love those types of stories. The backdrop was really interesting. And yeah, just at like a technical level, I think it fired on all cylinders. I don't think everyone's gonna get this or enjoy it, but I think critically and objectively, this was a really great movie. I'm gonna give it an A, and for my personal, I'm gonna go A+.
Wow.
This movie,
Is that our first? Is that a Green Corner first?
I'm not sure.
I don't think we have.
It might be.
I think this is a Green Corner first.
It could
I think this is
be.
our first A+.
And I mean, this is like day one reactions, right? Like we just walked out of the theaters, but I walked out of this feeling a lot of emotions. And there were many scenes in this movie where I was like choked up and felt like very emotionally overwhelmed in a way I have not in a long time. And it just clicked for me. And I'm really interested in high concept sci-fi concepts. And as much as an American Civil War has happened in the past, the way they heightened this is borderline sci-fi, right? Like the way that the American Civil War is played out and us being dropped right into the middle, it's like a near future sci-fi or a alternate history, whatever you want to call it. But like it's a thought experiment type plot.
Okay.
It's like The Purge. It's like Squid Game. It's not that it couldn't happen today. It's just like, what if this crazy thing happened, and then what would actually occur? I like movies that explore that, and this is an excellent version of it that doesn't get so hung up on the concept that it just starts spinning its wheels. It treats that with respect, and then tells a really good story on top of it with the journalists. So it worked as a sci-fi concept, it worked as an actual story of the characters, and the way it was executed, the way it built up tension around the big set pieces and the little vignettes, all of them just clicked for me. And I would rewatch this movie. I would also rewatch just parts of this movie. And like, I would rewatch the shootout with the guys in the Hawaiian shirts. That was just an amazing sequence. I'd watch the storming of the White House. They're like little sequences I would watch on their own. So it just worked for me. And maybe this is a honeymoon phase. You know, in a couple days, I'll start picking out things I didn't love.
Most of my green take scores tend to go down after a week. I'll come out and
my
say that.
walk out of the theater take was, I loved it. I don't really have anything bad to say. And I would watch it again tomorrow. So I'm going to go A+ on this.
Dang.
Why the heck not?
Why not?
Civil War.
Good movie. Go watch it. We're really curious to hear what you think, because clearly we're very divided on it.
Yeah, it's definitely the
We both
movie.
liked it, but
It's definitely a movie I think we've had the most differing, not how much we liked it, but the most differing interpretations of the intent. And
that's cool. That means good job, Alex Garland.
that means good job, sir. Keep making movies.
Keep
You're doing
making
a damn
movies.
fine job.
I'll go watch Men now. I owe that to you at least.
And I thought it was a really bold choice to have Robert Redford play the villain.
Right.
Damn, that's Winter Soldier again.
It's the same movie.
I'm gonna stop trying to make Marvel jokes because clearly I've mixed them up. But
Right.
Thanks for watching.
Green takes.
This is Green Takes. Make sure to like and subscribe. Check out our Patreon for more fun stuff.
It's free.
And don't have a civil war